Ina sat at a cafe in Euston Station, stirring her cooling latte. She watched the people around her, all either newly arrived in the city or about to leave. She imagined they thought the same of her, a young woman sitting at a table waiting for her train. But that wasn't the case at all. Her husband, Max, had driven her to the station. He'd kissed her goodbye and offered to wait with her until her train left. "No, you don't have to," she'd smiled. "You'll be late picking up Matthew from school." Max had nodded, hugged her one last time and driven away, fully believing that his wife was embarking on her first ever work trip this bright October morning. Ina was a primary school teacher, a responsible, demanding, but very rewarding job. It was her parents who had encouraged her to pursue it after she finished school. "You're so good with children," her mother had insisted. "Teaching is your calling. It's a wonderful and noble profession, perfect for a woman," her father had added. Ina had agreed and never regretted it. She'd grown up in a small town in the countryside, a quiet, dusty place with overgrown gardens where everyone knew everyone else. She had been a shy and obedient girl, a little scared to leave her family to study in the big, bustling city. But there were no universities in her hometown, so her only option was a technical college, which didn't interest her at all. Ina sighed, thinking of her parents. Her father was gone now. A heart attack had claimed him a few years back, still too young. At least he had lived to see his grandson. She still didn't understand how she had survived that year. It had all happened so fast. Her mother was also often ill with heart and blood pressure issues, a constant worry. The only thing that comforted Ina was that her mother lived next door to her brother Fred and his family. They looked after her, kept her company, and her mother helped them with their children. Even her son, Matthew, loved to visit his grandmother. A young family at a nearby table caught Ina's attention, a pretty young woman and a man holding a 1-year-old baby. They reminded her of herself, Max and Matthew, of how they had been not so long ago, carefree, happy, and content with life. On the outside, they still appeared that way, but Ina knew the turmoil in her own soul. She had loved Max from the very first moment. Or perhaps it wasn't love right away, but a powerful attraction. The first time she saw him, she felt an undeniable pull toward this stranger. And he hadn't disappointed. After getting to know him, she realized Max was wonderful, sensitive, caring, kind, and incredibly talented. She had always trusted him, more than she trusted herself, and he had never let her down. Or so she had thought, until recently. It was hard to say where things had gone wrong. It had happened so gradually, day by day, amidst the chaos of endless chores and worries. She hadn't noticed the changes at first. It all started with his work trips. Or maybe it was even earlier. At first, he just seemed a little distracted. His mind was occupied with something that seemed to inspire him. He would often have a mysterious smile on his lips. But who pays attention to such details after 8 years of marriage? The routine and daily chores just dull your senses. Max remained the same loving and caring husband and father. He took Matthew to the park and didn't shy away from household duties. He was the main breadwinner, and his salary made up most of their family budget. He was their rock, their protector, their security. Ina was used to it. Her husband had always been a responsible and decisive man. With him, she knew she'd never be lost. Ina knew Max still loved her. He would sometimes look at her with a warmth that made her heart melt, and he constantly gave her compliments and gifts, often without any reason at all. She knew how lucky she was. She'd seen what her friends and acquaintances went through with their husbands, men who believed their wives should bear the entire burden of household chores. Some cheated, some drank, some just constantly nagged. When the women complained about their partners, Ina couldn't even join the conversation. It made her feel happy. Max was her loving friend, her support, her hope. They shared everything with each other, absolutely everything, and they both believed the other would understand, support, and approve. Ina had become accustomed to this way of life, believing it was the result of their shared effort. "There's no such thing as a perfect husband," her friend and colleague Veronica would shake her head. They often spent their breaks between lessons in the school canteen, discussing everything. Veronica was a fascinating person, witty, lively, and energetic. Ina loved spending time with her. But Veronica had been disillusioned by men years ago. Veronica had once had a whirlwind romance in her second year of university. She'd lost her head over a man she'd met on the street. He'd simply walked up to her, showered her with compliments, and asked her out. Just like in an old movie, he saw a beautiful young woman and decided to pursue her. Veronica, who was always so cautious, said yes immediately. His confidence and persistence had completely overwhelmed her. She was under his spell, blind to the fact that he was much older and told her almost nothing about himself. All Veronica knew was that he was in London for a short time. He swore eternal love and made plans for the future. He knew how to charm an inexperienced girl. He created the image of a reliable, responsible man, showering her with flowers and attention. Veronica was ready to do anything for him. She even fought with her parents for the first time, who, suspicious of his intentions, wouldn't let her stay out all night. But their once obedient daughter, now an adult, slammed the door and ran to the man she adored. Of course, their happiness was short-lived. The London suitor vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. He just disappeared, stopped answering his phone. For a while, Veronica was worried, thinking something had happened to him. She even cried. Then she went to his hotel and learned that he had checked out, taken a taxi to the airport, and left. Veronica understood everything then, but she still clung to a sliver of hope. Maybe he had a good reason. Maybe he would still call. He knew where to find her. It couldn't all have been a lie, not the adoration in his eyes, not his promises of a future together. It wasn't possible, but her love of a lifetime never showed up. Veronica was devastated. She couldn't eat or talk to anyone. She felt crushed, broken, and betrayed. She thought her life would never be good again. A few months later, Veronica realized she had a more serious problem. She was pregnant. The news was a shock, but in a way it shook her back to life. She had a serious talk with her parents. They lectured her but stood by her, and so Veronica became a single mother. She and her daughter lived with her parents, who doted on the little girl. "She looks just like her father," Veronica would smile, looking at her daughter. "He was a handsome man too, blonde with emerald eyes. At least I got a beautiful daughter out of it." Ina knew Veronica's story and understood why she was so cynical about all men. Veronica now saw every man as a cheat and a philanderer, just like her daughter's father. It was pointless to argue with her. All of them cheat. Absolutely all of them, Veronica would insist. It's just in a man's nature. You can't change it. "I don't know. Maybe not all of them," Ina would smile. "Everyone," Veronica would repeat, unfazed. "And if they don't cheat, it just means they haven't found a chance yet. I trust Max completely." "You shouldn't be so naive," Veronica would shake her head. "They're all unreliable." Ina would try to avoid these conversations, but sometimes they just happened. She felt sorry for Veronica. She had had bad luck in her youth, and now she was unable to trust anyone. The only two men Veronica trusted were her father and Matthew, Ina's son, whose godmother she had become. The rest, she believed, were all potential cheats. Sometimes they would argue about Max. "He can't be that perfect," Veronica would say. "You just don't notice a lot of things, or you think they're normal." "No, we trust each other. He's my closest friend. This is what a good relationship looks like. Look at us. Maybe it will help you change your mind. Maybe you'll try to meet someone." "No, thank you," Veronica would say. "I've been there, done that." Ina would sigh. Veronica was a beautiful, attractive woman, and it pained her that her friend was missing the chance to feel desired and loved. She even suggested therapy, but Veronica refused. One night, after a friend's birthday party, they were in a taxi, and Veronica, who had had a bit too much to drink, opened up to Ina. After him, all other men seem so grey. No one measures up. He used me, he cheated on me, he hurt me, and I still think of him as the ideal man. I'm such an idiot, right?" After that conversation, Ina understood a lot more. It was clear that Veronica was still not over the father of her daughter, who looked so much like him and never let her forget. It was Veronica who first planted the idea that Max might be having an affair. They were out shopping for their children's school supplies, both a little sad that summer was over. Soon, lessons would begin again, not just for Matthew and Veronica's daughter, but for them as well. The early mornings, the endless routine, the stress. "Max is off on another work trip," Ina mentioned to her friend. "He's been away a lot lately, hasn't he?" Veronica said, shaking her head. "His law firm has expanded their reach." Ina sighed. She didn't like how often Max was away, but work was work. And are they paying him more? Veronica's question caught Ina off guard. No, actually, he's making a bit less now. Veronica perked up. Doesn't that strike you as suspicious? All these trips and his salary suddenly drops? It hasn't dropped by much, and the firm is just expanding. They need money for development. It's only temporary. That's what Max told you? And you believe him? Ina nodded. But her friend's reaction suddenly made her realize that Max had indeed changed lately. The distant look in his eyes, the secret smiles, the mysterious phone calls and text messages. When she thought about it, it did look like Max was hiding something. She remembered an incident. Ina had walked into the bedroom and Max, who was on his laptop, had slammed the screen shut. Another time, his phone rang, and as she reached for it to hand it to him, he rushed into the room, grabbed it from her, and took the call behind a closed door. And the work trips, they had become a lot more frequent. If I were you, I'd check his phone, Veronica said, shaking her head. I'm so worried for you. I'm afraid you'll go through the same pain I did, only worse, because you've been together for so long. They're all the same men. That conversation with Veronica was the trigger. From then on, a worm of doubt burrowed into Ina's heart, and she looked at Max with new eyes. She didn't like this change in their relationship. But the old trust was gone. One day, Max went into the bathroom and left his phone on the bedside table. Lately, he hadn't made a mistake like that. He'd carried his phone everywhere, as if afraid of missing an important call. Ina didn't hesitate for long. She knew it was wrong to snoop, but she felt she had good reason. She felt like a criminal as she touched the screen. The phone was locked with a password. This was new. He had never used a password before. Max clearly had something to hide. Max acted as if nothing was wrong. Ina didn't notice any coldness from him. He still hugged and kissed her before he left for work and tried to take care of her. But it was clear he was obsessed with something. Or someone. Something had completely occupied his mind. Ina knew her husband well enough to see it, but he wasn't sharing his secrets, and they used to tell each other everything. Could it really be another woman? The thought was sharp, painful, and cold. When she thought about it, she got goosebumps. She didn't want to believe Max would do this to her. Why would he? Everything had always been so good between them. Why would he need an affair? Was Veronica right? Are men really incapable of loyalty, even the best of them? Ina tried to fight off the exhausting thoughts, but when they came back, she desperately made up excuses for Max's behavior. The firm was expanding. There was a lot of work. That's why the trips were more frequent. He was tired. That's why he was quieter. But he still loved her and Matthew. It was obvious. The only thing that didn't fit her theory was the distant, almost loving look in his eyes when he looked at something other than her. What was the reason? His work had never made him this happy. He had gone to law school because his parents told him to, just like Ina. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do after school, but he was good at law. He was quick-witted and a good talker, and he had made a successful career out of it. He had worked hard, doing everything he could so that his wife and son would want for nothing. Once, Max had to make a very difficult choice. Ina remembered the moment well and had always cherished him for what he had done, knowing that he had sacrificed his dream for her. How could he do this to her after everything they had been through? She didn't want to believe he was having an affair, but all the evidence pointed to it. And Veronica would often fuel the fire with her stories about cheating men. Still, Ina tried not to think about it. She invented excuses for him, one after another, and it helped for a little while. But then Max's secret messages, his mysterious smile, his late nights at work, and the endless trips would come back to haunt her. Max was definitely hiding something. One day, in late September, Ina ran into Pete, a longtime friend and colleague of Max's, at a shopping center. They worked at the same law firm, but in different departments. "Hello, you look great," Pete said, smiling. "Hello, it's been a while. How are you?" "I'm good. Everything's the same, working hard," Pete said quickly. "Yeah, you guys must be working overtime now," she said, shaking her head. "You're expanding, aren't you?" The look of confusion on Pete's face, which lasted only a moment, didn't escape Ina. He clearly hadn't heard anything about the firm expanding, but he quickly recovered. Expanding? Pete said, a little unsure. "Yes, expanding. A lot of work." He gave her a big smile and tried to get away, but Ina wasn't going to let him. She already knew her husband's stories were lies. Pete's reaction had said it all. Wait, do you also go on frequent work trips now, like Max? Pete froze, not knowing how to answer without betraying his friend. His face showed his distress. Then he nodded and, excusing himself, rushed off. His behavior told Ina a lot. There were no work trips. Max was making them up to do what? To spend time with his mistress? Ina started watching her husband more closely. She hated her new role as a private investigator, but she felt she had no choice. She needed proof before she could confront him. She told Veronica everything. Who else could she talk to? Not her mother, who had a bad heart. Ina had no one else close by. That's not surprising, Veronica shrugged. You're not the first and you won't be the last. It's normal. I told you so. I'm not talking about that now, Ina said, exasperated. I know how you feel about men. What I need to know is how to get proof. Do I even need it? Yes, you do, Ina sighed. It was hard to explain to Veronica how difficult it was to accuse Max after so many years of happiness. What if she was wrong? It would crush him. And if she wasn't, he would just deny it without proof and make her doubt herself even more. Well, if you need proof, Veronica said thoughtfully, I have a plan that should work. You have to disappear for a few days. Make something up. Say you have to go see your mum or something. Just make sure Max believes you're out of town and won't be back for a few days. The flat will be all his, you see. You just put a camera in the hallway. They're cheap and you watch. If he has a mistress, he'll definitely take advantage of your absence and bring her home when Matthew is at school, and you'll have your proof. Ina smiled sadly. You've been watching too many films. She couldn't believe she was actually discussing such a crazy plan with her friend. Well, if you don't like it, come up with your own plan, Veronica said, a little offended. I'm just trying to help. I'm sorry, it's just so strange. I have to go now. Ina didn't want to stay with her friend any longer. They had always been close and supportive, but now Veronica's apparent glee annoyed her, as if she was saying, I told you so. Maybe Veronica wasn't happy about her friend's situation, but she was happy that her theory about men being cheats was proven right once again. Ina understood all this, but she still felt uncomfortable around Veronica now. At home, she thought about the plan and decided it was the only way to get the proof she needed. If he didn't bring anyone to the flat, it wouldn't prove he was innocent, but if he did... Ina ordered a camera online, choosing carefully. She needed a good quality one that could record for hours without needing to be recharged. It was expensive, but she had to do it. She also had to install it herself, something she was not used to doing. Max had always handled all the technical stuff, but she couldn't ask him for help with this. She watched some video tutorials and managed to set it up. Now everything was ready for the next part of the plan. Ina took a few days off work. She told Max she was going on a work trip. The tables had turned. He had lied to her about his trips, and now she was lying to him. You're going on a work trip? Max asked, surprised. You're a primary school teacher. Why would you go on a trip? It's a professional development course in London, Ina said with a shrug. I don't want to go, but the headmaster insisted. Well, if you have to, Max smiled. You must be the best teacher there. If they chose you, I was thinking, maybe I should take Matthew to your parents' place while you're away. Ina had thought he would jump at the chance to have the flat to himself for a few days. No, why? He'd miss school. We'll be fine, Max said, smiling. I'll take a few days off. Ina planned to spend her fake work trip at their family cottage. Where else could she go? She couldn't get a hotel. The cottage they had always dreamed of buying would now be her refuge while she spied on her husband. It wasn't a working cottage with large vegetable patches. It was a place for rest and relaxation, with a few flower beds and some cherry trees, a cozy house and a spacious lawn. They went there in the summer to escape the city, swim, sunbathe, and barbecue. And now it would be Ina's temporary hideout. She took her laptop with her, which would live stream the camera's feed. What would she discover? Who would she see? It was a terrifying and thrilling mystery. Max had dropped her off at the station and went home to take Matthew to school. He was sure his wife would be on a train to London in half an hour, but Ina had a different plan. First, she would walk around the city on her own without a care in the world to clear her head. She always found walking relaxing. Then, around noon, she would go to the coach station to take a bus to their cottage. She had a strange urge to walk around the city on her own during a weekday. She started at the Riverside Promenade, the most beautiful place in the city. The white railings, the clean pavement, the wide, calm river reflecting the sun. So many memories were connected to this place. It was here that Max had first kissed her. She hadn't expected it and had almost fainted from surprise. She had no idea he even liked her. She thought she was too plain for a man like him, who was always surrounded by so many beautiful women. She had been a rather lively girl as a child, but that had changed in her teenage years. She had suddenly grown tall and thin, with acne all over her face. She couldn't look at herself in the mirror. She thought she was the ugliest girl in her class. Her classmates didn't help. The boys ignored her, and some of the girls made fun of her. She didn't realize that many other girls were going through the same thing. She became shy, quiet, and insecure, but she was a very good student and always listened to her parents. Time passed, her teenage acne disappeared, and Inna blossomed into a beautiful young woman. But she was still that insecure girl, quiet and unnoticed. Her friends were the same. She remembered that time well. She was about to go to university in a big, vibrant city, and she, a girl who was used to living under her parents' wing, was scared of the changes. But she knew she had to leave. Where else could she study? Only the technical college. But her parents had convinced her to become a teacher, and she agreed. She still remembered when her parents first brought her to the city to see the flat where she would live. They could have chosen a dormitory, but her father thought an apartment was safer. A dorm is all about partying, not studying, he'd said. I can afford to rent a flat for my only daughter. And so, Inna's new life began. An independent and sometimes difficult one. She had to do everything on her own, wake up, cook, take the bus to university, and study in a completely new way. All the changes overwhelmed her at first. She wanted to go back to being her mom and dad's little girl, but she knew there was no going back. She made new friends, like Sarah, who came from a small village, but unlike Inna, was thrilled by her newfound freedom. Sarah lived in a dorm and often skipped classes. She knew all the best places to have fun in the city. They became close, probably because they were both from out of town. Sarah would sometimes stay the night at Inna's flat if she was out too late with friends. She would tell Inna about her adventures, and Inna would listen, fascinated. Sarah was so wild and free, like a character in a TV series. Sarah often invited Inna to come with her, but Inna always refused, saying she had to study for a test or write an essay. University wasn't like school. You had to work hard. Studying was Inna's top priority. You're wasting your best years, Sarah would say, shaking her head. You're so beautiful, but you're just sitting here with your books. Come to the club with me. We have an exam tomorrow morning. It's just history, Sarah would say. The exam is far away. We can have some fun. But Inna stuck to her guns. However, after a successful exam period, Sarah finally convinced her to go to a club. Inna had always wanted to go. Her friend made it sound so exciting, and the exams were over, so why not? Sarah was thrilled. Finally, I can take you out on the town, she said happily. But first, we have to get you ready. You have nothing to wear. But Sarah did. She dragged Inna back to her dorm and made her try on a pile of outfits that were completely out of character for Inna. Tight, ripped jeans, crop tops, and tiny rhinestone dresses. Sarah thought Inna looked amazing, but Inna felt like she was wearing a costume. You just don't get it, Sarah sighed, when Inna rejected another idea. Fine, just wear what you want. And Inna went in her usual jeans and a t-shirt, with her hair in a ponytail. But on Sarah's insistence, she did put on some makeup and a pair of her friend's huge hoop earrings. A couple of hours later, Inna regretted not dressing up more. Maybe then he would have noticed her. Sarah took Inna to a club and walked past the bouncers as if she owned the place. Inna realized Sarah was a regular here. People kept coming up to Sarah to say hello, both guys and girls. Sarah felt right at home, but Inna was a little shy in the unfamiliar surroundings, even though she liked it. Loud music boomed from the dance floor, where people moved to the beat. There were people of all ages, some flashy, some plain, some cool, some stylish. It was great to people watch. Inna stood for a moment, taking in the colorful crowd, but Sarah was already pulling her along. What are you waiting for? Let's go, they're waiting for us. Sarah led her up a narrow staircase. They ended up on a platform that overlooked the dance floor, filled with tables, comfy sofas, and chairs. From there, you could see the whole dance floor. Sarah's friends were already waving to her. They looked very cool, the guys in tight jeans and leather jackets, the girls looking a bit more normal. Ina was surprised until she noticed the guitars leaning against a chair. Now it made sense. These were Sarah's friends, a new rock band. Sarah had told her about them. They were supposedly very talented, writing their own music and lyrics. The girls sat down with Sarah's friends. "This is my friend Ina. I told you about her," Sarah said loudly to be heard over the music. Everyone's attention was on Ina. She blushed. "Hi, nice to meet you," she heard. She smiled and nodded. The conversation moved on, and Ina was no longer the center of attention. She relaxed. She liked it here. She scolded herself for being so shy and tried to act as cool as everyone else. They were talking about how the band was about to go on stage, but their lead singer wasn't there yet. They were jokingly complaining about a guy named Max, and then he appeared, a guy with slightly messy dark hair. He wore faded jeans and a baggy t-shirt, and his style was very different from his friends. But he was different in other ways too. Special. He had a playful, slightly cunning look in his eyes and a charming smile. The friends who had been complaining about him a moment ago lit up when they saw him. "Finally," one of the guys groaned. "We're on in 15 minutes." "You know I'd never let you down," Max said, clapping him on the back, and then he noticed a stranger, Ina, and gave her a dazzling smile. It revealed two dimples that sealed the deal for Ina. She was lost to him from that moment on. "We have a lovely stranger among us," Max said. "This is my friend Ina," Sarah said right away. Max, a true gentleman, took Ina's hand and kissed it, gently and carefully. It was a funny theatrical gesture. Someone even laughed. Max seemed to be the life of the party. But for Ina, that kiss was everything. When he touched her hand, her head spun, and she almost fell over. She was still in a daze when the musicians grabbed their guitars and ran down the stairs. "You all right?" Sarah smiled at the dazed Ina. "Max has that effect on people." Ina didn't deny it and nodded. "He's just charming." Then the band, Farvater, with Max as their lead singer, took the stage. The guys gave it their all, and the crowd went wild. They were local rock stars. Ina thought their performance was just as good as anything on TV. She was sure this band would be a huge success. Their music was full of energy and meaning. The songs were catchy and profound, and they touched people's hearts. The audience sang and danced along. The guys knew how to get a crowd going. Ina's attention was on Max. He was both rugged and gentle, strong and full of energy. Sometimes he would smile, but his eyes were always serious. Ina couldn't take her eyes off him. "They're a great band," she said. "I've known them for a while. I met them at a disco at their university. They all study law, by the way." "Oh," Ina managed to say. She couldn't understand what was happening to her. No one had ever affected her like this. She was so drawn to Max like a magnet. She didn't even notice the other guys. The band played a few more songs and then came back to the table. The night went on. Max talked with his friends and joked around with the girls. He barely noticed Ina. He was buzzing with energy from the performance and the success. He was surrounded by a special aura. And all the girls, long-legged, thin, glamorous, and confident, were looking at him. Ina knew she had no chance. He was a local star with so many fans. Compared to them, she was a grey mouse. She regretted not listening to Sarah and not wearing something more glamorous. She felt invisible, sitting there in her jeans and t-shirt. After a while, Max just disappeared. He left with someone to go somewhere else. The evening lost all its magic for Ina. She called a taxi and went home, leaving Sarah with her friends. From that day on, Ina thought about Max constantly. She remembered his eyes, his smile, and that light kiss. She desperately wanted him to touch her again. She tried to hide her feelings from Sarah, but her friend noticed everything. Sarah was sensitive and perceptive. She would now deliberately invite Ina to the club if she knew Max would be there. Soon, Ina felt like she was a part of their group. She and Max talked often about films or the news. He was a thoughtful and deep person, and they had a lot in common. Ina loved being with him, looking into his eyes, talking to him. Sometimes he would put his arm around her shoulder, and her heart would melt like ice cream in the sun. But Max was always surrounded by beautiful girls, his fans. Sometimes he would look at one of them in a way that made Ina want to run out of the bar or club. She was so jealous and miserable. She desperately wanted him to look at her with that same admiration. "Max is a heartbreaker," Sarah told her once. "It's no surprise, the girls just throw themselves at him." "Does he have a girlfriend?" "No, nothing serious. He's too busy with his music, the band, his studies. No time for a serious relationship. I'm sure of it." These words made Ina happy, but also sad. What did it matter that he was single? He would never look at her the way he looked at those girls. He only saw her as a friend, a good conversationalist, a girl from his group. But that was better than nothing. Still, Ina was consumed with jealousy every time Max paid attention to one of his fans. She had never been an aggressive person, but she wanted to grab them by the hair and throw them down the stairs. Sarah noticed everything. "Calm down, you fury," she would whisper in her ear with a smile. "He doesn't want her. He doesn't want anyone right now. It's just a fleeting fancy for inspiration." Sarah was perceptive and wise beyond her years. Ina trusted her judgment completely. It was a shame they grew apart after university. Sarah, so full of life, moved to London to find happiness. They exchanged a few messages, and then they lost touch. It happens. About a year after they met, Ina and Max had become good friends. Ina's life had changed completely. Before, her days were all about studying, but now she learned that with some good planning, you could balance school and fun. She discovered a whole new world, new friends, interesting people, and her first love. Yes, Ina was 20 years old, and in love for the first time. She had had crushes on boys in school, but it was nothing like what she felt for Max. And even though her feelings weren't returned, they enriched her, inspired her, and made her feel special and strong. Ina started dreaming. She would often dream about Max hugging her and telling her he loved her. It was so unreal and beautiful. Max was studying, rehearsing, and performing with his band all over the city. Farvata was getting more and more popular. The guys were being invited to play at company parties and birthdays, and their earnings were growing. The band, which had started in a garage, was now famous. Ina knew why. They were talented and authentic. Their songs were meaningful and touched people's hearts. The music made people want to dance. The guys were in love with what they did, and that's why they were successful. Max was the acknowledged leader of the group. He had been to a music school and often joked about how he hated it, the boring theory classes and music literature, the lack of choice in music, the strict teachers, the exams, the endless practice. All of it almost killed his passion for music. Luckily, his grandmother intervened and his parents let him quit. And that's when Max started doing what he truly loved. He started writing his own music and lyrics. The first people to hear his music were the kids in his neighborhood, and they loved it. He had his first moment of fame performing at a local cafe for a crowd of truck drivers eating steak. They loved him, applauded, and asked for more. This inspired the young musician. When he finished school, his parents suggested he go to law school in the city. Max was a smart guy, and studying was easy for him. He had no particular career plans. He would have loved to be a famous guitarist or singer, to have his own band and make millions, but he knew those were just dreams. The chances of that happening were very slim. He was a rising star in his small town, but in the city, there were hundreds of musicians just like him. There was too much competition. In the city, he met guys who were just as passionate about music as he was, and most importantly, they could create it. And so, Farvata was born. They just wanted to have some fun, not think about fame. They rehearsed in the garage of one of the band members. Then they played at an event at their university, where the owner of a local club heard them. He invited them to play at his club for a small fee, and it all took off from there. The guys wrote new songs and performed at clubs and bars. They became famous and created their own website where they would upload new songs. Their music was downloaded frequently. Farvata was known far beyond their city. They were even invited to play at some London clubs, and they went on a real tour. What had started as a hobby was becoming something more and more serious. It inspired the guys, and Ina was genuinely happy for them. But at the same time, the band's growing popularity meant that Max was becoming an idol for young, beautiful girls. One day, one of them would steal his heart, and he might no longer want to be friends with Ina. The thought was painful. It was a warm evening in May. The exams were still far away, and Ina had time to relax. She decided to go to the club with Sarah. Farvata was supposed to play there. The guys weren't there yet. They usually came just before they were supposed to go on stage. Inna was excited to see Max again, to talk to him, to be close to him. It was a blissful feeling. But that night, an older man in his 30s kept bothering her. He stared at her, made sleazy comments, and even tried to hug her. He was pushy and unpleasant. Inna tried to get away from him, but he would always find her and start talking. He bragged about his money, saying he had just come back from a work trip. He told her he had never seen a woman as beautiful as her and offered to spend some time with her. He didn't do anything wrong, but his persistence was a little scary. Inna went upstairs and told Sarah about her problem. Sarah just laughed. Another broken heart on your conscience. You're a heartbreaker. But Inna was not in the mood for jokes. Because of him, she couldn't go to the stage and watch Farvata perform. Then she learned that Max and the others weren't going to stay after the show. They were leaving for another concert and had a flight in the morning, so they had to be in top shape. They would finish the show and go straight home. Inna was so upset she almost cried. She hadn't seen Max in 2 weeks and missed him so much. Her head started to hurt. Farvata played their last song, bowed, and left the stage. Inna wouldn't see Max for a long time. I should go, Inna said with a sigh. Are you serious? The night is just beginning. Holly and Tanya are coming. It's going to be fun. Stay. My head hurts. I'll see you later. Inna called a taxi and went outside to wait. It was very late, and the music from the club was muffled. She was alone on the porch when the man who had been bothering her came out. He was even more drunk now. My queen, he said, and came too close, and she could smell the alcohol on him. He had been watching her. Inna felt a wave of anxiety, and when he put his arm around her waist, she got really scared. He had had a lot to drink, but he was incredibly strong. He could do whatever he wanted with her, and there was no one around. Calling for help was useless. Go away, Inna said, and pushed him. She didn't want him to know he had scared her. You're a feisty one, he said, smiling even more broadly and moving toward her. I love it. Inna knew she had to run. She turned and ran, but he caught her instantly, before she could even reach the car park. He grabbed her arm, his eyes filled with malice. You've been playing hard to get all night. You're not getting away now. He dragged her toward a car park nearby, probably his. Inna struggled, but it was no use. She was horrified by the thought of what he could do to her. And then a miracle happened. She didn't even understand what was going on. The man suddenly let go, and a moment later he was on the ground. A young guy in a black leather jacket was pinning him down. Inna, the guy said in surprise, looking at her. It was Alex, one of the Farvata band members. Not Max, but a lucky coincidence. Inna wanted to kiss her savior. The man groaned and struggled, but he couldn't get away from Alex, who was much stronger than her. A few seconds later, the other guys showed up, including Max. So she would get to see him after all, even if it was under strange circumstances. The guys were surprised to see it was Inna. We saw that guy pulling a girl toward his car, but we didn't know it was you, Alex said, expressing the general sentiment. Are you all right? Max asked, and Inna felt the warmth of his hand. She smiled. I'm more than all right, she said. It was the truth. You must have been terrified, Max said. A little, Inna nodded it, and then she started shaking. She was only now realizing how close she had come to danger. Just then her taxi arrived. That's my taxi. I have to go home, she said, her voice shaking. Max hugged her tight with his warm, strong arms. He was trying to stop her from shaking, and it worked. She leaned into him, inhaled his scent. The man who had just tried to abduct her was still on the ground, but she felt like she was in heaven. You can't be alone right now, Max said, shaking his head. I'll take you home. What about him? Alex asked, pointing at the guy on the ground. Just leave him, he can't even stand, Max said with a wave of his hand. In the taxi, Max held her in his arms, stroking her back and shoulders, saying calming and comforting things. He was so reliable, so familiar. She soaked it all in, wishing the ride would never end. But the flat her father had rented for her was close by. Do you want to go home now? Max asked when the taxi stopped. Inna shook her head. She didn't want to go home at all. To the promenade, Max told the driver, and then he turned to Inna. You're coming with me, aren't you? You shouldn't be alone right now. Inna silently thanked fate for that horrible man. Without him, Max would never have invited her for a walk on the promenade. At first, they just walked in silence, holding hands like two people in love. The promenade was lit by streetlights. They would smile at each other now and then. It was a moment of incredible connection. Ina knew she would remember every second of this walk for the rest of her life. And then something completely unexpected happened. Max stopped, turned her around, and put his hands on her shoulders. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, looking into her eyes. He was so serious and so nervous. Ina had never seen him nervous before. She thought she hadn't heard him correctly, so she just nodded, and he kissed her. They stood there, hugging and kissing in the light of the streetlights, with no one else around. It was all too fantastic, too unreal. Then they talked for a long time. Mostly, Max spoke, and Ina just listened and smiled, unable to believe it was really happening. "I've known you were the one for a long time," Max said, hugging her tenderly. "I've never felt this way before. At first, I just liked talking to you. I looked at you and thought, what a great girl, smart, kind, sweet. And then I realized I started to miss you when I didn't see you. I realized I needed you." It was a revelation for Max. He had dated other girls, had passionate, short-lived romances, but no one had ever made him feel what Ina, a shy girl from his social circle, made him feel. "Soon I was looking at you with different eyes. I liked you more and more. And I realized there's no one else like you. I know a lot of girls, but they're all different. You're special. I'm always so happy and at ease when I'm with you." Ina's head was spinning. Could this really be happening to her? Max was saying things that made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. She didn't know what to say. The words didn't seem strong enough. Instead, she hugged him tighter, and he stroked her head like a cat and smiled. He knew what she was feeling. From that moment on, they were a couple. Ina knew in her heart that they were together. Later, she told Max that she had fallen in love with him at first sight, but had been too shy to show it, thinking they had no future. "Why?" Max asked, truly surprised. "You've always been surrounded by friends and beautiful girls. I felt like a grey mouse next to them. And I saw no sign that you liked me," Max said with a smile. "I know what girls do when they like a guy. They're always trying to be near him. They flirt, they get shy. But you were different. I had no idea you liked me. I was afraid of ruining our friendship. We had such a good, easy relationship, and I didn't want to risk it." Their relationship wasn't always smooth. They got to know each other and learned how to be together. But being with Max made Ina feel like a different person, loved, beautiful, and protected. And she loved that feeling. Max took care of her. His love was expressed through his care and protectiveness. They were almost the same age, but he acted like he was much older. He took responsibility for everything and solved all the big problems. Ina couldn't believe Max was with her now. She had dreamed of this moment for so long, had pictured it in her head, but she was sure it would never happen. And now it was. Sarah, as it turned out, had seen it coming. "I saw how Max looked at you, but I thought I was imagining it. I'm so happy for you." "I can't believe I didn't notice anything," Ina said. "You're not good with details." Sarah smiled. He hid his feelings well too. "You're not good with details." Sarah's words, spoken so many years ago, suddenly came back to Ina. Her friend was right. Back then, Ina hadn't noticed, and now she had missed everything again. Ina was walking past a fountain. She and Max had spent so many hours on that bench, laughing, kissing, enjoying their youth. The world seemed so bright, so simple, so warm because they had each other. Max would talk passionately about his plans for the band. Music was his whole world, and his eyes would light up when he talked about the band's future. It was his creation, and he had high hopes for it. Ina was happy that he had found something that gave him so much energy, especially since Farvata was becoming a more and more popular band. Ina supported him. She thought he would become a star. He was so talented and passionate, and the audience loved them. They would only go higher. Max had no plans to work as a lawyer. He often told her it was too boring and routine for him. Ina agreed. He was a creative person. He had to be a rock musician, conquering new heights. It was impossible to imagine the Max she knew in a white shirt and smart trousers in an office. And then something happened that changed everything. It happened at the worst possible time. Max and Ina were about to finish university. They had essays, exams, and had to find a job. And Max got an offer that you couldn't refuse, a life-changing offer. A famous London producer had seen Farvata's videos online. He had somehow found Max's contact information and called him one day. At first, Max thought it was a prank or a scam. It was hard to believe someone would call him and offer to create a new band with him in London. And the person calling him was a famous producer whose artists were always successful. Huge concert halls, big money, tours, a big stage. That was Max's dream, and he deserved it. Ina was overjoyed when he told her the news. "You've worked so hard for this," she said. "This is great. I know you'll be a success. Your songs are special and you're so talented." "That's all true." Max smiled. "But you see, they only invited me. What about the guys? Farvater exists because of them. We did all this together. And if I leave, the band will fall apart." Ina nodded. She now understood that Max's choice was more difficult than she had first thought. "But you have to move forward. If you become famous, you can help the guys later." Max nodded. But he was still unsure. Ina couldn't let him pass up this chance. She went to Alex, one of the original band members, who was a kind and honest guy. She told him what was happening, and at first, he was thrilled. But then, he was sad, knowing it was the end of Farvater. But Alex did what Ina had hoped he would do. He was the one who convinced Max that he couldn't pass up this opportunity. Max felt so much better after talking to the band. They all told him he had to go. They were true friends, with no jealousy or resentment. Ina knew she would see Max less now. He would have to live and work in London, and she would probably move there too to be with him. Max said that he would get a place as soon as he could, and Ina trusted him. But it wouldn't be right away. At first, he would live with the other band members in a house outside of London and rehearse from morning till night. It would be a difficult and long period. The producer had warned him, but the project looked promising, and that prospect became Max's guiding light. He was ready to forget everything else and just work. It was his passion, after all. Ina was happy for him, but also worried. This was a real test for their relationship. They wouldn't see each other for a while, and London was full of beautiful, talented girls. What if Max? He had proven his loyalty and love to her. But what if? Ina tried to fight off the worries. She just told Max she would miss him terribly, and he hugged her and said he didn't know how he would live without her and promised to stay in touch. He was already getting ready to go. He had finished university, and it had been difficult to get the exams done early. But he managed. His bags were packed, and he even had his tickets. And then this happened. At first, Ina didn't even want to take a pregnancy test. She was late, but that happened often. But one morning, she felt sick. She spent half an hour in the bathroom thinking she had food poisoning. But the next morning, it happened again. She knew she couldn't ignore it. She went to the pharmacy and bought a test. She did it right away and stared at the 2 clear lines. She couldn't believe it. Her first emotion was joy. She and Max were having a baby. This was wonderful. It was early, but they would manage. And then she thought about the fact that her beloved would be leaving for a new life. Next week. He wouldn't be there for her. What was she going to do? That evening, they were walking around the city. He was holding her hand and talking about his excitement. "I feel like a character in a film about a rising star," he said. Max was in a great mood. His mind was already on the big stage. He had so many ideas, so many plans. It was difficult for Ina to tell him her news, but she had to. The first thing she noticed was his smile. He was happy. And the weight on her heart, which had been there since she found out she was pregnant, disappeared. The pregnancy was not a mistake after all. He was truly happy. "This is a miracle," he said, hugging her. "How do you feel?" "I'm okay, just a little sick in the mornings. Nothing else." Then they walked in silence, still holding hands, each lost in their own thoughts. Ina was watching Max. He was clearly making a big decision. "We have a lot to think about," Max said finally. "Our baby changes everything. Our whole world will be different now. We're parents. We have to make sure our baby is happy and safe and wants for nothing." Ina looked at Max happily. She wasn't feeling that way yet. She was just quietly happy that a new little person was growing inside her. Max and Ina were living together now. He had rented a small 1-bedroom flat near the studio where Farvater rehearsed. It was cozy, but a baby couldn't live there. There wasn't even enough space for a crib. They had dinner, watched some TV, and went to bed. In the morning, at breakfast, Max told her his decision. I'm not signing the contract. I'm staying here. We're having a baby and we're going to build a new life together. I have to be here for you. For a moment, Ina felt a huge relief. Max was staying. With him, she could handle anything. She wouldn't have to face the problems and difficulties alone. But then, she realized what this decision meant for him. She couldn't let him give up his dream. No, Shwamkum. Ante no, she said, shaking her head. Don't even think about it. I'll be fine. I can stay with my parents for a while. You can't pass up this chance. You have to go. I'll be fine. It's only for a short time, maybe a year or two, 3 at most, and then we'll be together again and you'll have achieved your dream. No, Ina, Max said, smiling and putting his arm around her. I have to be here for you and our baby. I don't just have to, I want to. I don't want to miss all those important moments. What about your music career, the fame? That's for kids, Max said, waving his hand. He tried to sound nonchalant, but Ina knew he was hurting. The decision hadn't been an easy one. He was sacrificing so much for her and their baby. It's your dream. It's a waste to throw it away. You don't know if anything will come of it, Max said, shaking his head. Success depends on so many things. The producer didn't promise anything. He just said we should try it. What if it doesn't work out? That's a huge gamble. And we need money and stability right now. We have to be ready for the baby. And I don't want to miss the first days of his life. You can't get those back. And Max stayed. He got a job at the law firm, the same kind of routine work he hated. But he was happy he got it. It's a very promising company, he told Ina. Good salary, good opportunities. Just what a family man needs. Ina smiled, but her heart ached because he was making such a huge sacrifice for her. It was a test, and he had passed with flying colors. But his place wasn't in a stuffy office. The band members tried to convince him to come back, to start the band again, but he refused. He had to work. He didn't have time for rehearsals or shows. His life had a new purpose. That chapter is over, he told his friends. I'm an adult now. Soon, Max was able to rent a bigger flat. Then they got married with no pomp or circumstance, just a small get-together with friends. They needed money for other things. Baby clothes were expensive. Then Matthew was born, and Max was a wonderful father, caring, attentive, and loving. When he held his son in his arms, his eyes were full of a special light. Ina saw that her husband was happy, and it comforted her. They went through a lot: sleepless nights, financial struggles, and even a relationship crisis. But they made it through, and their love stayed strong. They both worked hard to make their family what it was, strong and happy. They bought a flat and a car, and even a cottage so they didn't have to keep their son in the city all summer. Ina was now on her way to that cottage. She needed to spend some time alone. She sat on the bus, looking out the window. The sun was shining, but autumn had arrived. The trees were yellow, the grass was brown, and the air was crisp and clear. She had never been here this time of year. Everything seemed familiar, but different. It felt so strange not to trust Max. They had been together for so long. He had proven his loyalty so many times. He had given up his dream, his music career. He hadn't played music since he had to earn money for the family. Only recently had he started picking up his old guitar again, but only to teach his son simple chords. He was a wonderful father, attentive and involved, but his recent behavior just screamed that he was seeing someone else. And soon Ina would have proof. But what would she do then? She didn't know. The bus stopped at her stop. It was so quiet here now, unlike in the summer when children were everywhere. She walked down the street passing all the other cottages until she saw theirs. They had been so happy when they bought it. They had made it their own, a cozy place for a family holiday. They had decided together that the cottage was for relaxing, not for working. They had always agreed on everything. Ina opened the gate with her key and walked into the garden. The house looked abandoned and lonely. She walked up to the door and pushed it open. It was unlocked. That was strange. Max was never careless like that. But when she walked inside, she knew someone had been here recently. Someone was here. An ashtray was on the table and a cigarette was still smoldering. The chairs were scattered and a man's hoodie was on the bed, someone else's. And then a terrible thought struck her and she broke out in a sweat. Of course! How could she have been so stupid? Why would Max bring a mistress to their flat with all the neighbors around? He would bring her to the cottage. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. The fridge was full of food. It looked like the woman had been living here. On their cottage, the cottage they had bought for their son. How cynical. But the house was quiet. No one was home. They must have gone to the shop or for a walk, enjoying the autumn weather. How romantic. Ina walked quickly to the main room. This was where they all slept when they came to the cottage. She didn't recognize the place at first. The table was pushed against the wall and a drum kit was in the middle of the room. On the bed, near the window, were two electric guitars, a white one and a black one with a brown stripe on the body. She recognized that one. It was Max's. He hadn't touched it in so long, she had almost forgotten what it looked like. But he used to play it on stage, singing his songs, and the audience would sing along. It felt like another lifetime. Ina was confused. She had expected to see a woman's clothes, but this? Then she heard male voices outside. They were coming back. A moment later, the room was full of people. She knew all of them, Alex, Liam, Sam, and Max. Max was holding a big bag from the local shop. So that's where they had been. Ina? Max couldn't believe his eyes. What are you doing here? I took you to the station this morning. What am I doing here? Ina asked. That's a very long and silly story. I'll tell you later. But first, can you tell me what's going on here? Let's get out of here, Alex said, understanding the situation. And Ina and Max were alone in the room. They stood there, facing each other, in silence. Max spoke first. He smiled apologetically and pulled out a chair for her. He sat on the edge of the bed. Well, my dream didn't let me go, Max said, and took Ina's hand. Farvatar is back and we have some great opportunities. It all started about 3 months ago. A guy from London called me, a new producer, just as famous as the other one. He had seen our videos online and loved our music. It was just like before. But unlike the first producer, he liked the whole band. He wanted to know what happened to us and found out we were no longer together. He saw